good afternoon. It is afternoon here in the UK, in London. We have some people from elsewhere join us today. Welcome, good morning and good evening as well to you all. We try and keep these webinars deliberately light and to the point. So we'll try and give you about 5 minutes of your time back at the end. We'll open in approximately 15 to 20 minutes. We'll open to questions and to follow-up conversation with everybody. But if you have questions in the meantime, just feel free to raise your hand, and we'll be happy to have a side conversation with you guys. So my name is Florian Krueger. I am a partner in Fintricity, and we're going to be having a quick chat today about the blog article which we posted online, is it now about 3 weeks ago, about big data MythBusters. And we felt compelled to do that because there's a whole lot of hype around big data and analytics right now. Much of it is overhyped, as hypes do, some of which is relevant. And for the relevant bits, I just wanted to follow up at the end with some facts, and in the meantime just go through some of the hype things in the beginning. So as I said, Florian Krueger, that's my name, and I'm working here with Fintricity, with our team in London and elsewhere. We have been around since 2001 and have gone through various, if you like, hype cycles. We've seen the rise and fall of various topics as isolated ideas that were at the time the solution to everything. And we've seen them either become a department, some knowledge, some justified area of their own, or actually be incorporated as a discipline in everyday's behavior. I'll talk a little bit about where we think that this is going to end up towards the end. So we have a provocative statement here from somebody that we've picked up, some of you might have seen that before, but it is a little bit like that. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about big data. Everybody's now got a chief data officer, VP data, something like this. And still, the maturity levels vary, to say the least. So where do we help to clarify some of the confusion? If you've seen my blog, you've seen me talk about or challenge the fact that there is even something that can be quantified or qualified or identified as big data. I'm coming from the notion that there is data all around us. If you listen to music, for example, music consists of data. Music is data and mathematics, ultimately. Do we perceive it as data? Certainly not. So where is the boundary between, say, a 90s German tune called Da Da Da, which is basically consisting of 4 or 5 tunes, and something rather complex like an opera? Is the one big data? Is the one small data? Where exactly are these boundaries? Nobody has identified that. Nobody has said big data is, for example, if you're working on the genome project in the UK, we're creating terabytes of data with every single genome that we identify. We're having literally to do backups. We're having to shuttle around a truck filled with hard disk drives and flash disk drives of the latest state-of-the-art components just to do backups. So is that big data? Well, I would certainly think it is. But what about a component of that? What about a section of that? What if, for example, data is used to identify treatment possibilities out of a database of roughly currently 5,000 cancer patients, that is linked to the big data package, to the whole genome database? Is that then already big data, or where does it end and where does it start? So I think we should stop. Personally, I think we should stop calling it big data. We should call it data, and ultimately data sits within digital. in our opinion. It is a part of an overall strategy, and it should be at the heart of it, because information is at the heart of it. It's that what will win the war. It's that what will help us grow and change our company, and therefore outpace the competition. That's my myth number one. The second bit is that I want to talk about briefly, and I'm happy to share the slides with you at the end, even so there's not a lot of content on there, because we wanted to keep that, as we said before, rather deliberately light. It's easy to find data scientists is the second thing, right? So what constitutes a data scientist? What do you have to learn to become a data scientist? If you want to deal with data properly, is it a set of trainings that you require for your existing crew? Is it a set of trainings that you need to coordinate together with, say, a university, for example? So there are trainings available, which are really interesting. There are trainings that we can point you to, but the data scientist as such, in my opinion, does not exist. What you find is technologists, futurists that are really experienced, that know how to deal with data. You find sometimes people that have a very good mathematical mind and are able to design and create and run even algorithms within certain systems. We found recently a rather young chap, for example, who was particularly smart, but not necessarily extremely well educated, who devised a methodology to come up with one single data set, data type, if you like, object class, for a very complex problem, which was the forecasting of the energy consumption of buildings, of large non-residential buildings. And he found out that via a very well developed algorithm, he could actually compute the forecast solely by the weather, not the occupancy, not the type of building, not historical data, not any other combination thereof, just the weather forecast and an extrapolation thereof for the forecasting and prediction of the energy patterns. So it is a combination of subject matter expertise. It is a combination of subject matter expertise, mathematical capabilities, and also the understanding of the systems that you have in use. That is a combination which is really difficult to find. And if I were to start anywhere, I would highly recommend to start with common sense, with somebody that has a good grasp at the overall picture, can think, and excuse me for saying that again, outside the box, because it is a rather abused term, but still somebody that can step outside and see things in a slightly different light. There are a huge amounts of algorithms out there. There are huge amounts of open source intel this day and age. So it's really about being able to combine thoughts and combine threads, which is significantly making a difference rather than a particular training. So we're seeing trainings coming up. We're seeing people getting trained in data science specifically when they come to the market in 1 to 2 years, more and more in places such as Singapore, such as Finland or elsewhere. Then that might change, but right now it remains to be a challenge. On the third myth, where sometimes we find that the whole big data analytics is interwoven with cognitive being advanced machine learning, traditional machine learning, or even artificial intelligence. And we find that there is zero linkage, because the requirements in storing data and in using data to answer questions are not always related to a requirement to predict patterns and to help the machines and the systems as such to learn. If you look at the data management, the data maturity models, the DMM from the CMMI, then you will find that it is about optimized systems and not necessarily about self-improving systems. So rather than trying to do everything at the same time, rather than trying to create AML algorithms in combination with your interpretation for data, we would recommend to split that out and to look at very simple ideas first, try and identify macro trends and larger trends, and see how you can improve that, and also how your organization is able to follow that improvement, how you can change the processes and everything else that you need from a business architecture perspective to make that happen, and not try to do everything at the same time. So save cognitive for a later time, as interesting as it is. On the big data is a technology challenge topic. That certainly is true for some. If I take back that talk about that example again, which I've given originally about this UK genome project, where you literally have a technology challenge because you need to basically install one new rack with approximately 50 to 100 new drives in it every week, then yeah, it is a question of where do you procure that stuff, how do you make sure that it's managed well, how do you make sure that it's fail safe, that it's redundant, and all these kinds of things. But we wouldn't necessarily recommend to start looking at it from a technology perspective. We would really prefer you to look at it from a long-term game-changing perspective if you are able to work with data differently than you have done in the past. If you are able to get insight to answer questions that matter to you, that will enable you to outpace your competition, then these defining and identifying these questions, shortlisting the data that you require to be able to answer that question, is much more important than the technology. Technology is available these days, and whether you run it by yourself or whether you outsource it, there are plenty of options. An interesting perspective specifically for our UK and our European customers will come into the equation now that we have had the general decision about the Brexit. If you want to look at some of the stuff, you can look at brexperts.eu, where some of my colleagues are writing on some of the Brexit topics. And we'll have there a data center discussion and data security discussion very recently, where in a very short time, because we're helping to inform the decisions of the new UK government through various committees and papers that we have submitted to actually talk about data security and how that transpires in new policies. So there may be a slight technology challenge insofar as data centers that own the data, that process the data, are currently in countries where there may be no agreement after the Brexit. And some of that will have to be physically transferred. Some of that will have to be differently managed. But for the average person, for the average company that has appetite to deal with big data analytics, this has no impact whatsoever right now. And the technology should just be seen as something that is there, that is available, and that is on tap, rather than a big challenge or potentially even a bottleneck, which it isn't. Some of you have probably seen the 5 Vs that have been stipulated by a large-ish consulting company. And I find that quite irritating because, I mean, what does it even mean, veracity? I'm not a big fan of consulty synonyms and consulty metaphors and semantics. I think this can actually be described rather simply as 3 Cs, and the 3 Cs being current, correct, and complete. And that basically includes everything. If you have your data in a current state, but mind you, as current as you require them. So not all the data needs to be real time. Some of the data can be run in a batch, once a day, once a week, sometimes even once a month will be sufficient. So define what current means for you to be able to answer the question that you want to get answered is the point. The correctness is a clearly very important thing, because correct means that you need to have a process in place to define the quality of the data, the accuracy of the data, and to make sure that the decision you are going to make is actually based on the right information and not just some information that's available to you. But that is really all there is about correct. So it's a simple process that I would argue consists of roughly 6 to 10 process steps with very little physical aids that helps you to get to a correct data set step by step. And that is going to be an enterprise-wide endeavor. That's not going to be something that you can do just by deploying the process and waiting for it to happen. That needs to be part of a larger change management program or the existing change management program, which you undoubtedly already have in your organization. And the last one, the completeness, is really to make sure that if you have a question such as, say, for example, what kind of applications do I need to run my business in a specific area, then you can probably answer that question, as this example goes, I happen to know, with roughly 7 object classes and maybe something in the order of magnitude, 10 associations and the links that need to be well understood between these object classes. That is what I would consider then a complete data set. And if it is current and correct, then we can work with it. The value bit that's in the big new 5 V's is something that shouldn't be underestimated, because everything needs to be brought back to value. Everything needs to be understood in its financial context, but not necessarily as a point of focus. That is an underlying best practice that should not be ignored. I'm happy to discuss about that some more. So I think we got to the point where we can say that Agile is not for developers only. Agile is for data. If you want to be digital as an organization, you can't plan for 3 years ahead or 4 years ahead or 5 years ahead and expect everything to happen exactly as you planned and then be surprised if you miss the target and end up somewhere entirely different. I think in this day and age, we have seen plenty of times that projects average failure rate of above 70%, where they're out of budget, out of scope, or out of time, have become the norm. And if you want to change your organization, if you want to work more like a digital native, if you want to be more of an Uber or more of a Tesla, which has entirely different problems altogether, or somebody like that, then you need to be much more agile as an organization. And that means you need to accept the fact that not everything can be perfect. Many times you'll have a minimum viable product, you'll have an MVP that works, that will work for you, that can be adjusted very easily. And you will have to review yourself and your trajectory that you're on, ideally every really 2 weeks, and go down from a 6 months, 1 year planning cycle to an ideally monthly release, and in a perfect world at some point in time, a bi-weekly, a fortnightly review of where you've gotten. So I think this is a business best practice, which has become much more important now that we have challenges, we have disruptors in the market, not just in the fintech space, but basically in all markets, which are working like that. And they're taking on big ones, incumbents, such as, for example, a very large British bank whose chief strategy officer recently said over dinner to me that he has no idea where this is going. He knows that they are not going to be around in 10 years' time. He knows that they're probably going to be a platform, but he has no idea how this is going to shape up. And all they are trying to do right now is to be very nimble, or agile for that matter, and try and face all these various disruptors that are trying to get a bite out of their company and deal with them individually. But what is also important to see is that all these disruptors, not all of these disruptors will succeed, but only 1 out of 10 in a specific product that they will be competing on with a specific bank, with a large incumbent, will be sufficient if the disruptor, if the new start has that product and has gotten market dominance or ownership of the market for that product, then that will mean that there is a significant loss for the bank who might have been very profitable before in that space. Take FX trading, for example, and you see how many are coming up there. I just downloaded an app today, which allowed me to now transfer funds on the iPhone from one account to another in real time, FX, and not just some other value that the bank would give me. So there's massive stuff happening which will require more agility as it has done before, and therefore we need to think in sprints, we need to think in epics, we need to be nimble and quick, and we can't just lean back and wait for things to happen. So on that note, I just wanted to point out, I think I'm pretty much bang on time with the 20 minutes, so that we can open up in a second for questions. Just a parting thought, and then also one comment. Look at our Chief Data Officer forum at LinkedIn, which we've just founded, where I think we'll combine interested parties and start conversations and to manage conversations, contribute to conversations, plentiful, specifically around the value that's going to be added. In a recent meeting with the International Society of Chief Data Officers that has been started by the MIT, which we run here in EMEA, we've had a long conversation around the value that one is going to add in the future and how this will contribute to the overall company value, to the valuation in a sustainable fashion, and whether this will go down the road of having been a chief electricity officer in the turn of the last century, which is now, of course, obsolete. Will data be like electricity at some point in time, or is there something that we can do differently, that we should do differently, to justify the creation of specifically chief data officers and organizations around them? Look up the Chief Data Officer Forum. We'll have some more conversations there. Join us on the MIT's ISCDO. I'm happy to send that link around afterwards. If you are in that space and if you're interested in thought exchange, we have I'd say approximately 10-15% of the FTSE folks already attending there, and it's growing quite quickly. So happy to have more people there and to talk with more people. So that's it from me. And Ter, if you want to open up to have some more conversations and to take some questions if you have some. Otherwise, I'm going to give you some of your time back for the day. Thank you for listening.